Family dinners were supposed to be warm and inviting. But that evening, the moment I stepped through the door, the air felt different. Mom was smiling more than usual. Dad was uncharacteristically silent, and my sister, Amber, sat with her legs crossed on a chair, tapping away on her phone without even bothering to look up. The rich scent of lasagna filled the kitchen, the dish Mom only made when there was important business to discuss. Before I could ask, my eyes caught the scene at the side table. Mom was leaning over a stack of papers while Amber held a pen, clumsily signing a name. My name. The handwriting was so distorted, so foreign, that a single glance was enough to know it was a forgery. I froze. A sharp pain shot through my chest. Then I took a deep breath and walked in. Trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm home." Amber glanced up, a smirk on her lips. "Well, you finally decided to show up." Mom quickly folded the papers, forcing a smile. "Just some minor paperwork." "Dear, don't worry about it." I sat down. Dad poured some wine and asked a generic question. "How's work these days?" "It's fine," I replied, my voice tight as my eyes scanned the table. Everything felt staged. The clinking of silverware, the smell of hot cheese, the strained smiles. But beneath that veneer, I knew something was waiting to be dragged into the light. I glanced at Amber. She was still tapping her nails on her phone, her face indifferent, as if she were waiting for someone else to arrive at this party. Inside my chest, my heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and tension, like a tightly pulled string no one had cut yet. The plate of lasagna was placed in front of me, the steam blurring my vision. I cut a small piece, but I couldn't swallow. The air around the table was so heavy that a single careless word could make it explode. Amber set her fork down, her voice drawing out. "Mom, you cooked so much. I'm sure none of it will go to waste. As long as everyone knows how to share." She said it lightly, but her eyes shot straight at me. My heart clenched. I placed my fork down on the table, hearing the slight clatter, as a familiar memory flooded back. At 14, I worked part-time at a grocery store. I carefully saved my meager earnings in a tin box, hoping to buy a used car by the end of the summer. One evening, I opened the box to find it empty. Mom was sitting in the kitchen, her voice soft. "Amber's in trouble and needed the money urgently. Your father and I borrowed it. We'll pay you back." I was about to protest, but Dad cut in. "Families have to make sacrifices for each other." That sentence silenced every word in my throat. The clinking of silverware brought me back to the present. Amber sipped her wine, speaking nonchalantly. "Honestly, you're so lucky. A stable job, scholarships. I'm sure you won't mind sparing a little this time, right?" I forced a smile, my heart aching. Another piece of the past clicked into place. The day I received my university scholarship, I thought it was a victory that was mine alone. But that evening, Mom told me quietly, "Amber failed a class and has to pay to retake it. The fee isn't small. Your sister needs it more." I fell silent, waiting for Dad to object. He just sighed and nodded. In that moment, it felt like my joy was being suffocated. Amber put her fork down, tilting her head to look at our parents, but speaking loud enough for me to hear. "So, are we going to do this? With the signature, everything will go smoothly." Mom gave a slight nod, her eyes darting toward me before quickly looking away. Dad remained silent, pouring more wine. Another memory flashed by. I had saved all summer to buy a laptop. The day I planned to buy it, Amber got into trouble with the neighbors. My parents said, "We need the money to fix the fence first. The computer can wait." I nodded, and the tears I swallowed fell into the kitchen sink that night, unnoticed by anyone. In the present, Amber leaned back, sighing as if bored. "Mom, Dad, I think you should just tell her straight. No point in beating around the bush." Mom set her spoon down and looked at me, her voice laced with a saccharine sweetness. "Claire, you know the family is going through a difficult time. Your sister needs a sum to start over. You're in a good position, so please, help her this one time. I took a deep breath. My hands clenched into fists under the table until they went numb. No one mentioned the stack of papers on the side table. They thought I didn't know. I looked around the table. Amber tapped her nails on the surface, feigning nonchalance. Dad avoided my gaze. Mom wore a strained smile. The atmosphere was like a well-rehearsed play, just waiting for me to say yes. I lifted a glass of water to my lips, trying to keep my voice calm. I remember. Very clearly. The other times? Amber looked up, frowning. What did you just say? I set the glass down and smiled slowly. Nothing. Let's eat first. We can talk later. The table fell silent. The smell of cheese was still strong, but it tasted bitter in the back of my throat. I could see the restlessness in their eyes. And this time, unlike all the others, I wasn't going to back down so easily. Amber rested her chin on her hand, sipping her wine as she began to ramble on about her new business idea. Her voice was so enthusiastic, as if she were already on her way to becoming a famous entrepreneur. I sat silently, listening to every word, but my mind was replaying the vastly different paths we had taken. My university years were a constant cycle between classes and shifts at a small coffee shop. Days were spent buried in textbooks, and nights were spent in an apron, wiping counters and pouring coffee until late. Some mornings I'd wake up slumped over a table with aching hands, only to rush to class. Each semester ended with a scholarship envelope. Not much, but enough to keep me on my feet. At my first job in a PR firm, I vividly remember the anxiety of submitting my first proposal. A colleague smiled and said, "You always get things done." And I just smiled back, hiding the dark circles under my eyes from lack of sleep. Amber was different. She changed schools a few times before dropping out altogether. She initially wanted to study design, then communications, and later business. Mom and Dad always nodded along. Amber needs more opportunities. I once asked her quietly, just out of curiosity, "Have you ever thought about providing for yourself?" Amber shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. That's what family is for, to help each other. I didn't argue further, knowing it would be pointless. After graduation, I saved every penny to buy a small apartment on the edge of the city. It wasn't fancy, but to me it was proof of years of struggle. Meanwhile, Amber showed off new cars and designer bags. I knew exactly where they came from, our parents' money. The way they doted on her made me feel like a shadow, only mentioned when they needed an example of a hard worker. One time, Mom called me into the living room, her voice gentle but firm. Amber needs a little more capital. Think about it, she's your sister. I just remained silent. Protesting was futile, and agreeing felt like biting a piece of myself. Back at the dinner table, Amber was still talking, all about new opportunities and friends who believe in me. Mom and Dad sat on either side, nodding, their eyes shining as if this time it would surely be a success. I sat opposite them, listening in silence. Amber's voice blended with the old memories in my head. The sound of her hand tapping the table as she described her ideas was no different from the frantic beat of my heart when I had to take an extra night shift. My parents' nodding smiles today were identical to the ones they wore when they pulled money from their pockets to give to her, while I had to scramble to pay my own rent. The distance across the dinner table wasn't far, just the length of a white tablecloth. But it felt like I was in another world, looking at a family that had never realized how many times they had pushed me to the fringes. I raised my wine glass in silence. Amber kept talking. Mom and Dad kept nodding. And I just listened, letting every unfair memory pile up, building a silent wall inside my heart. The scent of lasagna reminded me of other, much simpler dinners at my grandmother Evelyn's small house. Back then, she would cut a cake or a pizza into sections, explaining as she did, "This is for necessities. This is for saving. This is for others. And this small piece, this is for you to reward yourself." I'd laughed, asking naively, "Why do you have to divide it, Grandma? Isn't it more fun to eat it all at once?" She chuckled, her eyes kind. "If you eat it all at once, what will you have left for tomorrow?" It was one of the rare times I was taught to keep something for myself, not to share everything with others. Grandma Evelyn was the only one in the family who saw the imbalance. When I was 15, after my car savings were taken, I ran to her house, my eyes filled with tears. She didn't blame my parents, nor did she tell me to let it go. She simply poured a glass of milk, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said softly, "You have a right to be sad. But more importantly, you have to learn to build walls to protect yourself. Otherwise, there will be nothing left for you." On summer afternoons, I would sit with her on the porch, listening to stories of her youth. She had worked as a seamstress, saving every penny to support her mother and 2 younger siblings. She emphasized, even 1 penny is valuable. Others might look down on it, but if you know how to save, it can feed you for a month. Then one day, terrible news struck. She fell ill. The cancer came late, giving no one much time to prepare. I juggled work and hospital visits. Amber only visited twice. The first time, she brought a fancy box of food and spent the visit talking about her fry. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the hospital window, she called me over, her voice slow. "Claire, listen carefully. I've thought a lot about this. I love your parents, but they've let Amber get used to depending on them for too long. I can't let my life's work be washed away like that. This inheritance, I want to leave it to you," I stammered, worried, "but if they find out, they'll definitely object." She squeezed my hand, her voice firmer than ever. "They can be angry, but this is my choice. You just need to stand firm." A short time later, she asked my Aunt Margaret and her lawyer, Mr. Harris, to come. I sat by her side as they read through the documents. The atmosphere was formal and tense, but I saw an unspoken resolve in Aunt Margaret's eyes. This time, no one can take it away. After the signing was complete, Grandma Evelyn let out a sigh of relief and gently squeezed my hand. "Remember, Claire, you must learn to hold on to what is yours." Those words were etched into my mind. Now, sitting at the dinner table with my parents and Amber, the memory was painfully clear. I remembered my grandmother's frail hand and her tired yet relieved smile. And I knew that tonight was when the test would begin. The sound of forks and knives scraping against plates was steady and consistent. No one brought up the topic again. I could feel the silence waiting for a turn. Amber dropped her fork and cleared her throat. "We can't pretend forever. This family has things to discuss." Mom set down her spoon, glancing at me before looking away. Her voice was sweet but revealed an apparent impatience. "Claire, you know, your sister is struggling. Meanwhile, you're stable with your own home. If you help, things will be so much smoother." I swirled the water in my glass, not responding. That word, help, was as familiar as an old song, played on repeat. My father spoke next, his tone heavy. "Families have to support one another. You remember that, don't you?" Amber jumped in, her voice hurried. "It's not like I haven't tried. I have ideas, I just lack the capital. If I get support this time, I'll definitely make something of it." I lowered my voice, trying to stay calm. "How much? Specifically?" Dad looked directly at me. "About $250,000. That should be enough to pay off her debts and let your sister start over." The number hit me like a physical blow. It was nearly the entire value of the inheritance Grandma Evelyn had left me. I swallowed hard, hiding my shock, and pressed on. "Debts from what? What kind of business? How long would it take to pay it back?" She rolled her eyes, answering hastily. "Some previous online projects that didn't work out. A few late bills? But this time is different. If I have the capital, I can relaunch." "What project, specifically?" I insisted. She gave a faint, evasive smile. "An e-commerce platform. You don't need the details, you just need to trust me." The answer was hollow. I looked closer and saw beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Mom interjected, her voice trembling slightly. Claire, your sister just needs one chance. You still have so much. What's the harm in helping her one time? I toyed with my fork, letting the silence stretch. Anger was rising inside me, but I held it down. They were still acting, and I didn't want to break the script too soon. Amber suddenly scoffed. If Grandma Evelyn were alive, she wouldn't have let you have it all to yourself either, I choked. I vividly remembered my grandmother's frail hand gripping mine, telling me to hold on to your share. Hearing my sister's words made that instruction ring even sharper in my mind. Dad put his wineglass down and looked at me. We are not asking. This is what's reasonable. You have enough, your sister is in need. A family has to be fair. Fair. The word echoed like a hammer blow. Did fairness mean I carried more while they continued to take? I set my fork down, my voice even. We'll talk after we've finished eating. The entire table froze. Mom pressed her lips together and Dad furrowed his brow. Amber pouted but said nothing more. The air solidified. The smell of cheese wafted up. But to me, it was just the bitter taste of resentment in my throat. The supposedly warm dinner had turned into a trap, and I knew the storm was far from over. The atmosphere at the table was as heavy as a thick pane of glass. I set my fork down, trying to slow my breathing. Mom was about to speak again when a knock sounded at the door. Dad frowned. Who could be here at this hour? The door opened. Aunt Margaret walked in, her face stern. Behind her was Ethan, Amber's ex-boyfriend. I froze for a second, unsure why they were there. Amber shot up, her voice sharp. Who let you in? This is a family matter. Aunt Margaret paid her no mind, pulling out a chair and sitting up straight. Family matters need clarity. I don't want to see you being taken advantage of anymore, dear. Ethan placed a folder of papers on the table. I recognized them instantly. Copies of medical bills and credit agreements, all in my name, but with signatures that were clearly not mine. He spoke in a low voice. I've held on to these for a long time, meaning to bring them forward. Amber has used your name multiple times to take out loans and make purchases. I tried to stop her back then, but no one believed me. I went rigid, my hand gripping my water glass. Mom snatched the folder and flipped through the pages, her face turning pale. Dad, flustered, tried to deny it. There must be some mistake. Amber stepped forward, her voice a low growl as she snatched the papers back. Enough. So what if I did? She's my sister. Families are supposed to help each other. The words burst out full of fury. The room fell dead silent. No further proof was needed. She had just confessed in front of everyone. I looked up at her. In that moment, all the masks fell away. No excuse could save the situation. Aunt Margaret spoke slowly, her voice solid as rock. Evelyn prepared for this because she knew it would happen. The assets she left behind were not meant to be endlessly drained. If you intend to deny this, I will serve as a witness. Mom turned to her sister, her voice urgent. Margaret, why are you interfering? This is our family's business. My aunt looked her straight in the eye. It's family business, but it uses someone else's forged signature under Claire's name. That's no longer just family business. I sat silently, my heart racing. Ethan pushed the folder toward me. I'm sorry I didn't step forward sooner. But you needed to know the truth. I gave a slight nod, saying nothing. Only one thought echoed in my mind. The truth was out. And this time it hadn't come from me. They had exposed themselves. Amber stumbled back, her hands trembling. She looked to our parents, expecting them to defend her as they always had. But their eyes were just as lost, unable to find any words to cover it up. The dinner table, once set for lasagna, had become a battlefield. And I knew from that moment on, all the curtains of pretense had fallen. The room was plunged into silence. Ethan's folder lay on the table, and Aunt Margaret's steely gaze seemed to seal off every escape route. I took a breath and pulled my phone from my pocket. Mom frowned. What are you doing now? I didn't answer. With a single tap, the screen lit up. A short video appeared, a view of Mom and Amber huddled over the side table, a pen moving across the papers, the crooked letters spelling my name. The audio was clear enough. Mom's whisper, "Hurry, she'll be here soon." The bright screen in the middle of the table reflected in everyone's eyes. Both Mom and my sister were frozen. Amber shot up, her voice cracking. "Are you spying on me? You secretly recorded your own family?" I replied slowly, enunciating each word. "I just recorded the truth." Mom lunged forward, nearly screaming, "Claire, you're insane. This is a private family matter. Are you trying to destroy this family by showing this?" Dad raised a hand to stop her, his voice low. "Everyone calm down. It's just a misunderstanding. There's no need to be so tense." I looked straight at him. "What misunderstanding explains my forged signature? What misunderstanding turns the assets Grandma left behind into a tool for someone else's spending?" Amber's face flushed red. She walked around the table and pointed a finger at me. "You're just selfish, always thinking you're better than everyone, just because you have a cheap degree and a tiny apartment. If you cared about this family, you would have given us the money a long time ago." Her words cut through the air like a knife. I was silent for a few seconds before answering concisely. "This isn't selfishness. This is the first time I'm keeping what belongs to me." I heard Aunt Margaret take a sharp, quiet breath as if in agreement. Ethan looked down while my parents sat in stunned silence. Amber continued to shout, her voice choked with emotion. "Grandma Evelyn always favored you. She never saw my efforts. She left everything to you. What more could you possibly want?" Mom clasped her hands and turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Claire, please don't turn this into a chasm between us. Your sister, she just needs a chance." I shook my head. My voice was calm, but inside a storm was raging. "A chance? How many times has it been?" "Time after time." I stayed silent through it all. But Grandma Evelyn saw it. She left it to me because she knew that if she didn't, everything would disappear again. Dad slumped in his chair, muttering, "No, it can't be." I stood up, the chair scraping back with a screech. Every eye in the room turned to me. I spoke with finality. "I am not signing. I am not giving my permission. And I will not let anyone impersonate me ever again." With that, I slipped my phone back into my pocket and turned away from the table. Hasty calls followed me. Mom's sobs, Amber's curses, Dad's hoarse voice calling my name. But I didn't stop. The front door slammed shut behind me. In the darkness of the porch, I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the calm wind fill my lungs. Behind me, the sounds of arguing echoed. Chaotic, desperate. And for the first time, I felt a lightness in my chest, even though I knew that from this moment on, the Mitchell family had entered a storm with no way out. That night, my phone buzzed incessantly. The messages came one after another, the tone shifting from pleading to rage. "You are an ungrateful child. You have ruined this family. You will pay for this." I didn't reply. I knew that dinner was only the beginning. A few days later, the official documents arrived. My parents and Amber had hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit to contest the inheritance. They accused me of having undue influence over Evelyn's decisions during her illness, claiming I had coerced her into leaving everything to me. A chill ran through me as I read the lines, but the shock was fleeting. I immediately called Aunt Margaret and Mr. Harris. In Harris's small office, the three of us sat around a wooden table piled high with files. Harris pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, his voice firm. "They can make a lot of noise, but we have the advantage. All documents were signed while Evelyn was of sound mind, with a doctor's certification. Margaret is a witness. And now we have the video and Ethan's testimony." Aunt Margaret took my hand. "You are not alone in this. This time, we will see it through to the end." In the following days, Harris and I reviewed every document, every email, and every bank statement. Not just to defend, but to prove the truth. Grandma Evelyn was completely lucid when she made her decision. Ethan agreed to testify, bringing with him old text messages where Amber had bragged about using my sister's name to get a loan. Then the court date arrived. The hearing room was cold and bright, with hard wooden benches and the smell of new paper mixed with the sound of the judge's gavel. I sat beside Harris, facing my parents and Amber, their faces tense but defiant. Their lawyer stood, his voice sharp. Ms. Evelyn was mentally manipulated by her granddaughter. Claire took advantage of her grandmother's illness to seize the entire estate, excluding the rest of the family. Every word fell heavily. I clenched my fists, feeling anger rise within me. But Harris just placed a light hand on my shoulder, signaling for me to remain calm. When it was his turn, Harris presented the facts clearly and concisely. Your Honor, the entire estate was transferred into a trust, while Ms. Evelyn was of completely sound mind. We have medical records to confirm this. We have a direct witness in Ms. Margaret, Ms. Evelyn's sister. Furthermore, we have clear evidence that the plaintiffs have repeatedly forged our client's signature for their own financial gain. He held up copies of the documents and a USB drive. The video I had taken at dinner played on the courtroom monitor. The room fell silent. The image of my mother and Amber hunched over, forging my signature, was undeniable. All their justifications seemed to crumble. Ethan was called to the witness stand. His voice trembled but remained resolute. I warned Amber. I saw her sign Claire's name on loan documents. I still have the text messages to prove it. Finally, it was Aunt Margaret's turn. She stood tall, her voice unwavering. I was present when my sister signed the papers. I attest that she was completely lucid and that this was her own voluntary decision. She stated multiple times that she wanted to protect her assets from being misused. Each of her words was like a blade cutting through the fragile facade on the other side. My mother bowed her head. My father's hands were clasped tightly in his lap, and Amber's face was beet red as she shook her head repeatedly. When the judge declared, "The court dismisses the lawsuit in its entirety. The trust is legal and cannot be contested," I felt like I could finally breathe. Across the room, their faces fell. They had not only lost the case, but were now burdened with massive legal fees. Stepping out of the courtroom, the sunlight hit my eyes. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief I had never known. For the first time, it wasn't my endurance or my silence that had won, but the law itself standing on my side. After the ruling, I expected silence from my family. But I was wrong. Just days later, they unleashed their anger in long, rambling text messages. My mother wrote, "You have brought shame upon your parents. What kind of daughter takes her own family to court?" Amber's texts were full of blame. "If you had just shared a portion, no one would be suffering like this." I didn't reply. All calls went straight to voicemail. Any letters or messages were forwarded to Mr. Harris. I knew that if I opened the door even once, I would be dragged back into the same toxic cycle. News spread quickly through the extended family. Relatives whispered. The story about the forged signatures got out. Old friends of my parents became distant, and the party invitations stopped. The large family house was sold at auction to cover the legal fees, and they moved into a small, cramped, and noisy rented apartment. Amber lost her car, her designer bags, and the social circle that had once surrounded her. The people who had once flattered her now turned their backs. She complained on social media, but no one believed her anymore. I chose silence, not out of hatred, but because I needed peace. I started going to therapy. In the calm, softly lit room, my therapist would listen, then say gently, "You have lived for so long feeling like you had to carry the weight for your entire family. You now have permission to set it down." I cried, but they were tears of relief. From then on, I started journaling every week, a quiet morning with a cup of coffee, a slow, unhurried walk, a deep night's sleep no longer interrupted by accusatory text messages. Looking back at the inheritance files, I remembered Grandma Evelyn's words, "Keep your share, and if you can, do good with it." The idea of a financial aid foundation for young people came to me. A few months later, the Evelyn Foundation was established. We started offering classes on money management, saving, and avoiding debt traps. Aunt Margaret joined me, and Ethan volunteered his time. As I stood before our first group of students, their faces eager and hopeful, a profound warmth filled my heart. I couldn't change my past, but I could use what I had saved to change the future for others. One late evening, I lit a candle in front of my grandmother's photograph. In the flickering light, her face seemed to offer a gentle smile. I whispered, "Grandma, I kept my share, and I'm using it to plant the seeds of what you taught me. Holding on to what is yours is not selfishness. It is self-preservation. It is how you protect, nurture, and carry on a true legacy."